So if there's one chain in Cosmos that has a chance to survive whatever plague is happening in the ecosystem now, it's definitely Neutron, right? And I mean as a DeFi chain. I'm not going to count Akash and Jackal. Those are specific deep-in businesses that will probably do quite well. Well, I've been working with Neutron, part of the creator program, so I'm paying more attention to it. They recently left the Cosmos Hub's security arrangement with their recent Mercury update, and now they're trying to seed liquidity for the apps that are going to be deploying. So Neutron is kind of like a new chain now, but it's really not, because it's been around for about 2 years. They've had a lot of time for their token to get distributed. I think eventually this will be a net positive for the ecosystem, a lot better than how DeFi-minded chains start off, when they have a genesis and the tokens get all minted and they get given out manually to whoever, and then it's a race for liquidity and users and all that. So I'm going to do what I do best. I'm going to read one of my tweets to you that you already read like 2 weeks ago. And here it is. And this started with Neutron getting criticized for taking Neutron DAO tokens and deploying them into Mars, which is a lending protocol. They're trying to incentivize activity on Mars without, inflation, which is typical when a chain launches. They have to use inflation. Inflation is an expense, and it's expensive to encourage activity on a brand new chain. This practice of using treasury tokens around the ecosystem selectively, possibly to boost TVL, it has not yielded good results in Cosmos, and I would imagine it hasn't yielded good results in many places, maybe even accelerated the death of many L1 tokens, or worse, facilitated big players as they exit at the expense of the passive stakers and holders of the token. And I don't like when DeFi metrics are manipulated. I really don't like that. But like I said, Neutron is trying to seed liquidity. So deploying funds that are sitting there idle is one way to do this. And I was thinking, what are some ways that chains can kind of nurture their early DeFi ecosystem? How do they seed liquidity? Should they just try to evolve organically with no incentive? That seems kind of silly with the thousands of blockchains competing with them. But method number one, like I point out here, deploy idle tokens into smart contracts. Deploy idle L1 tokens into smart contracts. And there are pros to this. There are cons, but there are pros, right? You set a base TVL for builders to tap into. The cons, the apps have risk, right? You're putting everyone at risk potentially if you deploy a certain amount of tokens that are sitting idle. You're also picking and choosing winners to an extent, and I don't love that. But like I said, you're setting up some TVL. TVL sometimes gets the attention of users, so this is one viable method. Method number two, utilize chain inflation or airdrops as incentives. This does work as a way to attract users quickly. There's always buzz around these quote unquote free tokens. The problem is you're going to attract the wrong kind of users. You're going to attract mercenary capital. This is totally not sustainable. We see this all over proof of stake whenever there's a token genesis with super high inflation dedicated towards early ecosystem liquidity. Method number three, seek outside investors to deploy their capital, maybe in exchange for equity. I don't like giving them tokens because then you end up with these vesting schedules that are kind of like ticking time bombs. But I've never seen a straight up equity deal where investors put up capital and then they're getting collecting fees in perpetuity for leaving their capital there. This would allow chains to launch with really no inflation and no need for a treasury, in my opinion. And yeah, VCs, right? If these are VCs, you want to call them VCs, they now have incentive to promote the ecosystem, drive activity to the ecosystem, maybe using their other networks. But there are cons to this, right? And the con is that most L1s, most apps, they don't make money. So there is no equity. And of course, VCs are historically looking for fast 100x returns. This is not going to be very attractive unless the business model for the DeFi ecosystem is quite sound and pitched very effectively. And then finally, method number 4, which I think is the best way, is to have the validators provide the liquidity as a condition of validating the chain. How would this look? Well, in order to validate the chain, they would need to have some of their own capital tied up in the apps around the ecosystem. This would give them skin in the game. This would give them incentive to stay on top of the apps, maybe to help maintain code. In return, they're getting staking rewards for doing the security, the minting of the blocks, and the validating, and all that. Right now, most proof of stake validators get paid to do absolutely nothing because the blocks are mostly empty, right? Well, pros, you would get mandatory validator alignment, and you would stop rewarding the minting of empty blocks because validators would be driving activity or incentivized to drive activity to the apps where their liquidity was deployed. They could form sub-DAOs with the other validators, right? Maybe you have 5 validators that are really good with building DEXs or at least marketing DEXs. They put their liquidity in the liquidity pools. Then you got maybe 7 validators over here that are really good with lending protocols, right? And what would eventually happen is the validators become the VCs, they become the app builders or at least partners with the apps, and they have become stewards of the ecosystem. I don't see any cons to this other than you would have a hard time convincing validators who are used to getting paid to do almost nothing to now put up their own money rather than be extractive and essentially bleed out the ecosystems, which is good for them and bad for everyone else. So, in summary, Neutron, they are rolling the dice by manually distributing their token across 2 apps on their chain. This has yielded subpar results previously, but a bull run could make this look like the perfect play, right? Overall, I don't think we're on the precipice of a major altcoin boom. Do I like community pools or treasuries? No. Am I personally LPing on Neutron with my own money? Yes, a little bit. I'm farming the droplet campaign, so I guess I am an LPer. And am I going to get fired for posting such a slanted tweet, maybe almost too honest of a tweet? Am I going to get fired from the Neutron creator program? Not yet, but I'm guessing eventually this will get me into trouble. But what are you going to do, right? It's just part of being in DeFi for so long. You see so many things blow up in your face, blow up in everyone else's faces. Is this time different? Could be. I do like the token distribution and where Neutron is starting from. Otherwise, I would not be in the creator program, but we'll see. I'll have to release some videos on Mars, release some videos on Drop, and follow this thing for the long term, because after all, Dead Cat Crypto, we're here for the long term.